am excited today to do this talk with you and with Lisette Arellano, because this is about everything that I love. Bay Nature Magazine and Citizen Science and Mount Tam and all the people that contribute to the health of the mountain and the health of our lives. So I'll just say a few housekeeping things. One is this is the first talk of a series for Bay Nature through the year, the first talk of 2021. So keep tuned in for more talks that Bay Nature will be putting on. If you have trouble with this video, with this interface today, never fear. Bay Nature will send you a link to it and you'll get to see it in your own time. For those of you who registered and for those of you who have been donating to Bay Nature, huge heartfelt thanks for being part of this community and helping to support what we really do care about. As we go along with the talk, with what I'll give a brief introduction, then Lisette will take over. Lisette and I will then talk a few minutes between ourselves, and then we'll open it to a question and answer with you guys. So if you have questions that come up before or in the middle of our talks, put them in the Q&A. And the really great people behind the scenes here from the David Brower Center, who deserve very special thanks for facilitating this, will be keeping an eye on that Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen, and then it'll take 1 second to go to my to the head of my, I have to figure this out better, to go to the first slide. So slideshow from the first slide. And I'm really only going to take a few minutes with this. I'm going to give you a very quick tour of how I came to citizen science, which was through this book, Evidence of Evolution, which I published in 2009 with photographer Susan Middleton. And one very important reason for me to tell you this is because evolution, which is the story of life on Earth, the great family tree that includes all of humanity, but also all of the other creatures that we share our space with and who make our lives possible, all of this is evolution. And citizen science, community science today is in support of that. But also because it was really here when I did this book at the California Academy of Sciences that I began to go on my path to become a citizen scientist. And this is the Xerxes blue butterfly, which has the ignominy of being the first invertebrate to go extinct due to human impacts in Golden Gate Park. This is a specimen from the Academy. And this is our beautiful butterfly by which we tell ourselves never again, right? We're not going to let that happen. So how are we not going to let these extinctions happen, even as human pressures bear down with greater and greater intensity on nature? So this is this book, The Spine of the Continent, that I wrote after Evidence of Evolution. And this is a story of conservation biology and how we know what we need to know to how nature works and what it needs for protection. And that led me to my next book, which is Citizen Scientist, Searching for Heroes and Hope in an Age of Extinction. And because I live in the Bay Area, I tell the story of this through Bay Area science. And the thing is, going back to Evidence of Evolution and the California Academy of Sciences, the roots of citizen science and community science are very deeply enmeshed in the history of professional science or the Western scientific tradition. They also intersect very deeply with what we sometimes call traditional ecological knowledge. This is a piece I wrote for Bay Nature in 2016, and I've been a longtime contributor to Bay Nature. Bay Nature is an amazing repository of the history of science and nature in the Bay Area, going back to its inception more than 20 years ago. And it's also a community-based endeavor. You know, when you read Bay Nature, when you're part of the Bay Nature community, you are holding hands, virtual hands, with many others with the same kinds of curiosity and interest in supporting our life here and elsewhere. And Bay Nature has been really progressive in understanding all of the threads that go into nature, including underknown and underrealized threads that today are getting a lot more attention partly because of publications like By Nature, the Amundsen Land Trust, which is an important story in my citizen science book. Citizen science, community science. Lisette and I, maybe if people are interested, we can talk about the difference between those two terms. But today, data, information contributed by regular people without a PhD is contributing more than 60% of global biodiversity information to the common knowledge of the world, of the earth. This is profound. It's astonishing. It's fantastic. A lot of this is getting accomplished through iNaturalist, which Lisette uses in many of her programs, and which is housed at the California Academy of Sciences. So, I mean, in some ways, we could argue that the Bay Area has been a real hotbed and a real consolidating leader in citizen science. And certainly the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, and especially the One Tam initiative that Lisette works with, have been incredible leaders in this. So I have been around and reported on the development of citizen science at the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, going back to the first Bioblitz that the Marin Municipal Water District did with the California Academy of Sciences. Can't remember, 2012, 2011. This is Alice Eastwood. She's my patron saint of citizen scientists. She ran the botany department at the California Academy of Sciences for decades and decades. And she's loved Mount Tam. And she documented, especially the manzanitas on Mount Tam, with great fastidiousness. Here she is on Mount Tam. And there she is, I think, to me, I love this photograph so much. I try to always wear a hat with flowers myself. And I look at her eyes and I see there's a person who's connected to her life, who's connected to nature, who is happy because she's connected and she's helping to uncover this beautiful world that we all live in. And that's something that Lisette Arellano is also doing. And I'm going to now turn this over to her. I'll be back.
Thanks so much, Mary Ellen, for the warm introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen, do that ritualistic thing that we do. Presenters, great. Could I have some thumbs up that we are seeing the screen? Yes, we are seeing it. Great. Awesome. Hi again. My name is Dr. Lisette Arellano. I am the Community Science Program Manager for the One Tam Collaborative. I work for the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, and I love Mount Tam, and maybe you do too. So thank you for being here. One Tam is a collaboration between all of the agencies that hold public land on Mount Tam. So that is the National Park Service, Marin County Parks, Marin Water, California State Parks, and the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, which is a nonprofit that does not hold land, but we are kind of like the glue that helps hold this collaborative together. This collaborative started 2015-ish, and we do a lot of things together. We share resources. We work on issues of natural resources, education, programs together. You can sign up for our newsletter, check out our website, highly suggest it. You'll want to after this talk. Then working on Mount Tam is a real privilege. It's a beautiful place. There's just so much inspiration to draw from it. And the history of this land is complicated. And Mary Ellen already alluded to this a little bit. So today I'm going to talk a lot about how we create knowledge. But let's not get it twisted. There are things that have been known by the original inhabitants and still present inhabitants of these lands, the Coast Miwok. So I'm talking about traditional ecological knowledge. And, you know, that's, some of these things aren't actually new. That said, I would also like you to consider the following. In her book, How to Do Nothing, Bay Area artist and writer Jenny Odell proposes the revival of bioregionalism. This idea that instead of identifying as citizens of the state, we should identify as citizens of a bioregion, of a place that we live in and have an ecological relationship to. Odell makes the argument that bioregionalism is a powerful counterbalance to the many destructive forces that have shaped our societies. And so, I wish I could see all of you, and we could be together in a space physically, but many of us are people that live from all over the world that have ended up in the Bay Area through consequences of history. And so maybe you can join me and others in caring for the bioregion that we call home, because it's a very special place. Mount Tam is part of a globally recognized biodiversity hotspot and part of a UNESCO Biosphere Preserve. This means that there is nowhere else on Earth that's quite like this. And in recognition of that, in 2016, once the One Tam collaborative had come together, there was an effort to join forces with scientists from different sectors to evaluate the health of the mountain. I think there was a sentiment earlier on that's like, it's green, it looks fine, whatever. It turned out that once you looked at 28 different indicators and assessed their condition and trend, there were some things that we should be concerned about, and a lot that we don't know. So in general, we know a lot more about species that have a strong regulatory mandate, but hardly anything about other indicators. So these were big questions that needed a big solution to find an answer. And this is where community science entered the picture. And before I'll do that. So community science at its core is the practice of bringing together people of different backgrounds to engage in the scientific process for a common purpose. And in the context of my work at the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy, I want to acknowledge Alan Fish and the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory as leaders in this practice of bringing together members of the public and professional science. What I'm doing, I'm here presenting this work to you, but there are so many people behind us at the Conservancy, at our partner agencies. So I'm going to try to give shout outs and give credit where credit is due, but I just want to be very upfront. Like, I am talking about it today. This is like a big team project, and I just have so much gratitude for all my mentors and collaborators along the way. So, so community science at One Tam is allowing us to ask, to inquire deeply and broadly about biodiversity on Mount Tam. So I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour of what that looks like and how we get it done. And give me a second. There we go. Perfect. Okay, how we get it done. And our first stop is going to be the Marin Wildlife Picture Index Project, colloquially known as MWPIP. A lot of words, a lot of acronyms, I know. So the Wildlife Picture Index is actually a term with broader use. It refers to a biodiversity index used globally, and an index is a composite measure. Think about the stock market and like the S&P 100, for example. The index is calculated using a standardized method, and it's a landscape level metric. So this doesn't tell you what's happening next to your favorite picnic bench. It's much broader than that. And at One Tam, it's how we do conservation with a community science approach. So the way it works is that there's an array of camera traps set up in a regularly spaced way. So about a kilometer, the cameras are about a kilometer apart on a grid. The traps are checked quarterly, and from those cameras, we're getting millions of photos that turn into useful data once they're reviewed and tagged with identifications. This data is then analyzed using occupancy modeling and calculating the Wildlife Picture Index by our consultant, Dr. Sue Townsend. So what MWP allows us to learn, actually it's multiple benefits sort of thing. We can measure biodiversity, get abundance, baseline on abundance, and measure change over time. We're able to detect key wildlife habitat and look at how habitat types and land management might relate to the patterns that we're seeing. And there are surprises. Oh boy, are there surprises along the way. So hang on to your pants. So I'm going to tell you about some of what we have learned, some of the results. But I want to just make this really clear. These are spatially and temporally limited. So there are two main parts to the study area. There's the North Array, which was installed in 2014 and goes roughly along the Lagunitas Creek watershed. And there is the South Array, which was installed in 2017 and goes along the Redwood Creek watershed. We have data analysis, thank you to Dr. Sue Townsend and my colleague at the Parks Conservancy, Lizzie Edson, for the North Array for 2014 through 2017, and then for the South Array for the summer of 2017. Okay, so there's a lot of, this is like a cliffhanger, so just hold on. Okay, so there are, going into this data is there's a lot of graphs. So I'm showing you some sort of mock data to just kind of give you an idea of what we're seeing, right? So save those nitty-gritty questions. So our first finding is that species richness and abundance varies by season and subarray. So this tells us a few key things. One is that mammals are using the landscape throughout their life histories. Two, that each component of this landscape is a bit different. And three, that the identity and the sum of the parts matters. The other finding that we have had is that the wildlife picture index, so that composite measure itself, is stable or slightly decreasing for the North Array over the 3-year period. So take this with a big, chunk of salt, because we only have 3 points. If you measure anything, your heart rate, your stock portfolio performance, like you're not really making big decisions based on 3 points. So let's just make that clear. And for the South Array, we only have 1 point. So what this does say, though, is that the value of monitoring builds over the long term. And lastly, the big takeaway from this is that mammals need landscape level conservation. Now, I'm going to show you something really cool, but I have to put up this viewer advisory, otherwise my overlords are going to get mad at me. I want to make it clear that this is not nature au naturel. This is a composite image of some of the wildlife that have been detected at a single camera trap site. They were created by one of our volunteers, Matt McLean. And they're just here to show you some of the 17 mammal species that have been detected so far, 15 of which are native species. So we have also detected some non-native species, like this opossum on the over there, and some rarities for this area, like the puma and the spotted skunk that you see there. It took us quite a while. Ooh, why is that fuzzy? It's like Sasquatch status. It took us a while to find some of the rarities, like the badger and the weasel. It wasn't until we were in the project for a few years that those were detected. So in summary, if we were going to give mammal biodiversity a report card grade, what would we say? We'd say that each part of this landscape matters, that overall diversity is excellent, and the trophic structure is not dominated by any one group in a way that suggests a lack of ecosystem function, and that we should keep on looking for rare animals. So now you might be typing this into the chat, you might be like, what about the rest of the data? What's going on? You only talked about 2014 through 2017. And I'm here to tell you that every year we produce 2 million photos, and that is a lot of data. That is a lot of data of vegetation and shadows living their life. And that's fairly common for camera trap data sets. Something like 60 to 80% of camera trap data sets around the world are blanks. And so this is a big problem that needs a big solution that has come to us in the form of this platform called Wildlife Insights, which is an ambitious collaboration between Conservation International and tech giants, including Google. So again, this is using artificial intelligence to help deal with that bottleneck of wildlife camera data. One Tam has been at the forefront of being part of this global community of practice. And actually the AI was largely trained on data from Mount Tam. The other thing that's become very clear in this project is that technology only gets us so far. We cannot do this project without the support of community scientists. even once we evolve into our next iteration with the Wildlife Insights platform, we still need our human senses to figure out what it is that we're seeing. So we pressed pause on the volunteer program for WPI at the end of 2019. And while I'm not ready to announce and make promises yet, I can tell you that I hope to have some good news to share very soon. The other thing that's come through loud and clear about MWPIP is that anyone that has touched this project, this has changed the way that they think about doing science. From my early career colleagues, I've heard that the complexity and the ambition of this project made them realize how important collaboration is, what it takes to work with big data, what it means to gain community trust, and what it feels like to dream big as a team. So I think this data set will be a legacy that will help others after us build new knowledge and solutions in ways that we can't imagine. Earlier in my career, there were so many questions that I wanted to answer that I just could not do because there wasn't a foundation like this. So it really makes my day when graduate students email and put in for a data request. The next project I'm going to talk about is the Tamalpais Bee Lab. This is a collaboration with Dr. Gretchen Laboon at San Francisco State University. And this is another standardized protocol methodology that allows us to gain a landscape level perspective, this time on pollinators. And at One Tam, this again is how we do conservation with a community science approach. And the way it works is we do passive trapping via pan trapping and then some active trapping with netting. We need to catch the bees because it's really hard to study bees on the wing. There are hundreds of species and they have little tiny itty bitty morphological differences that require professionals to look at them. But in our process of getting the collections ready to be sent to the USDA pollinator lab, there's actually a really big role for community scientists. So we in the past have trained people on how to do collections management, so pinning those bees and doing some basic identification. While there is totally a place, a strong need for Terry Griswold in Utah, there's a lot that collectively we can learn and a lot of knowledge we can gain from each other by coming together and studying these insects. So again, we're actually tomorrow, I'm literally getting off of this webinar and getting my bag ready for the field tomorrow to install the next iteration of traps. So again, not promising anything, but hoping that we have some good news about a renewed effort for community scientists on this project very soon. What we learned from this project is similar to the Wildlife Picture Index. We're looking at diversity and abundance, change over time, and we're starting the development of distribution maps, which are not particularly well known for bees. And again, we're looking at the relationship between habitat and land management. The first, I would say, phase one of this project took place on the Marin Water and Mount Tam State Park lands. And there were 22 sites. There are also some sites, well, I won't get into that. There was some interesting experiments embedded comparing the different habitat types and management treatments that I will not have time to get into, but we'll make sure in the follow-up email, there's a link to a talk by Dr. Gretchen Laboon that will give you some insight into what we found in those embedded experiments. What I will tell you about is that an important first step in the study was looking at museum collections and the literature to get some basic parameters on expectations of bee diversity. And that what we found from that is that there's hundreds of species on Mount Tam that we could expect. And then the PSA that comes with that is that collections with robust metadata are really, really, really important. A lot of these didn't have good location resolution, and that kind of that got complicated. The other bit that Gretchen and her lab did is they looked at the literature for 211 rare plant species, and they looked at pollinator relationships and found that largely we don't know. But when we do know, bumblebees are really important. And so that's, we're still figuring out how this looks with contemporary data. But yeah, all this to say that if you see bees, take a photo of them, put them on a naturalist, it's evidence. All right, so how does the recent survey data compare to the historical data? So the survey revealed that 106 of 242 species were present, and that a large proportion of the genera were also present. Overall, 122 species were found in the recent survey, bringing the total species known for Marin County to 283. And the most abundant bee on Mount Tam is the tripartite sweat bee, Halictus tripartitus. And this collage actually is all images that I sourced from iNaturalist. So thank you so much to the people that contributed them. I think some of them might be on this call. Hi. And I just to say that just keep putting your stuff on iNaturalist. It's it's something that we use actively to inform how we're going to conduct a study, how we make those lists. So it's hard to ID bees from photos, but keep at it. All right, this is a really great segue now into talking lastly about bioblitzes. So bioblitzes, in sort of the strict sense of the term, if you will, are a communal effort to record as many species within a designated location, as possible. So, but this is an adaptable approach that can happen in person, and I'm going to argue it can happen online too. And this is actually how you can get involved, like right now. Like we can still be on this webinar, and you can get involved. So, little recap of how it works at One Tam. So this is I know every organizer of bioblitzes, and that's kind of the beauty of it. It's like a canvas, and you can paint whatever picture you want on it that suits your needs. So this is how we do stuff at One Tam. Is we find a place, a time, and usually a taxonomic focus, and we gather in person and or on iNaturalist. Then we go out to the field, we collect photos, audio recordings, notes, we upload those observations to iNaturalist. And then, once the data is in iNaturalist, it's available for so many purposes. That data comes with a lot of caveats, but it comes with a lot of possibilities too. And so again, what's exciting to me is that the Bioblitz framework is flexible and adaptable to new and urgent questions. And to the interest of community. And it's a place where we can have a lot of dialogue and trial and error. So I just want to tell you a little bit. Well, Mary Ellen gave you a sneak peek about this. We picked the same photo because it's an important photo. So prior to the formation of One Tam, this was in 2012, it was becoming evident that bioblitzes were something special. Again, in 2012, my colleagues at Marin Water, Andrea Williams, Janet Klein, and Suzanne Whelan began leading rare plant safaris in collaboration with Cal Academy. And groups of community scientists resurveyed a lot of Alice Eastwood's old stomping grounds. And this collective body of work deeply informed the rare plant inventory that Marin Water later on published. And we learned a lot about plant extirpations and began to see climate change impacts. And this was all through the collaboration of professional scientists and people from our community, some of whom I think are on this call. And I just want to say, hey, how you doing? It's always good to see you. Shortly later, like in 2014, 2015, when One Tam formed, and then in 2016, when the first peak health report was published, it became apparent that there were data gaps that would be really well suited to community science and to the Bioblitz framework. And so these were lichens and fungi, which you will notice I have in question mark, I'll tell you why, insects, and California giant salamanders. And so fungi aren't really in the report, but they emerged as a strong direction for two reasons. One is that they kind of got lumped in together. It makes some sense, but also it's like, different things kind of. But more importantly, fungal biodiversity on Mount Tam has been massively underestimated. So I parade the little figure around like, it's no one's business. And it's really inaccurate. And I
think we have access to chat. So some people in this call, in this webinar already know how inaccurate this is. But if you have a guess, how many fungal species are really on Mount Tam? Put it in the chat. I want to see. Oh, well, can people chat? I don't think you can chat. Never mind. Hold that thought. And it's okay. Hold that thought. I'm going to tell you that this is incredibly inaccurate. We'll talk about this in the Q&A. All right. So the second reason that this became a direction to take our bioblitzing is that there's a ton of energy around amateur mycology in the Bay Area and Northern California at large. And this is a really, really powerful thing. So in winter of 2019, we opened the doors for the inaugural One Tam myco blitzes, and it was popular. We had a lot of fun that year. We were able to look at Roy's redwoods in Marin County in a whole different way. And we documented 172 taxa, 63% of which were brand new to Roy's redwoods on INAD. And to my knowledge, there was no prior species list. I looked really hard. I didn't find one. So this was the beginning of something big. And in 2020, we're going deeper into building relationships, building our internal capacity to run these things, and trying to find a community-based approach to do sequencing. Yeah, like, just so you know, it's like it's like there's a scene of people that are sequencing, extracting DNA and amplifying DNA in their bathrooms, and I'm like, that sounds fun. Like, let's figure that out. Having worked a lot in lab settings, that idea of taking things and democratizing them and bringing more people into them is just really appealing. And then COVID-19 happened, and so we kind of had to take a stop and regroup a little bit. And in that process, a few interesting things happened. So in the lurch of COVID-19 and thinking about where we were going programmatically, this thought began to consume my brain. It's that a conversation or an experience that starts in person at a Bioblitz or when you're out in the field can continue on iNaturalist for years. So in many ways, yes, we're putting collections on iNaturalist, but we're also putting correspondence on iNaturalist. And it reminded me a lot of, when you see like letters between, Darwin and his collaborators, and how we learn a lot from those, right? So I'm just like, what we're building as a community is really wonderful and really interesting, and it bridges space and it bridges time, and it's also really place specific. So how can we make this more robust and bring intentionality to it? And again, I thought a lot about the work of Humboldt and Grinnell, and I think I saw Alexander von Humboldt on the webinar participant list. I just wanted to say hi, flattered that you're here. And just about how these individuals and their detailed record keeping have been foundational to our understanding of a changing world. And so we scale up to do that with more people, and we, that's incredibly, incredibly powerful. And in that, I think we're kind of at a point where we're iterating the next generation of our community science program at One Tam. And so I want to give you a little peek into what to expect. I'm going to call it Bioblitz 2.0. In that, I look forward to coming back together and doing our in-person events at a location and a place. But also, we can go a little broader. We can go a little bigger. We can build capacity online, in person. And so even though we haven't been together in a while, we're still here and we're still working towards something. So the first thing, some of you on this webinar have been part of this already, is I think mushrooms are here to stay. During the winter months. So that is something that we just kind of wrapped up, but something to look forward to. Then up next in the spring and the fall, we're going to turn our attention to butterflies and moths. Butterflies, and in particular monarchs, need our attention. And we just received a large grant from the Wildlife Conservation Board that's going to allow us to bring energy to this pressing issue. So expect to hear from One Tam regarding some butterfly specific programming during City Nature Challenge and California Biodiversity Day. The next thing that we are focusing on is there have been ongoing calls for attention and care regarding coyotes. So my colleagues at the National Park Service have been collaring and tagging coyotes in the Marin headlands in the midst of increased conflict and reports of diseases like mange and distemper. And we would really like it if people respectfully photographed coyotes. This is an exploratory project, just giving us, we don't know what we don't know. And so this is just a way of, if you see something, share something, if you will. And this last one, okay, this one, I have a thing for salamanders. It's my INAT handle on 10 salamanders. And as part of the iteration, next iteration of One Tam's Pink Health, I'm writing the chapter for California giant salamanders, which were identified as a data gap. So if you see a trunkster like this, or the larvae, respectfully take a photo and put it on iNaturalist, please. It would mean a lot. And consider joining the One Tam Peak Health Project if you saw it in Marin, and trusting us with your obscure coordinates. And again, these coordinates are shared, are viewed by me and then by the aquatic ecologists at the agency, or my partner agencies. Once we take them out of iNaturalist, we put them in a secure ArcGIS online database. And I right now have compiled a bunch of historical data on giant salamander occurrence, and I really need the contemporary data now to essentially look at the resurvey and think ahead about how we might monitor these animals, perhaps with a community science approach. So please help me not look like a total slacker at the next Peak Health meeting, which is on Thursday, and join this project, share your coordinates. I know that some of you that are on this webinar shared it in the previous traditional project. So if you could like rejoin and retrust, that would be so great. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. And you know, one by one, photo by photo, day by day, together, we're building new knowledge and showing up to connect with each other in a place that we love. And it's not everything, but it's an important part of knowing how to move forward in a changing world. So I hope to see you around in person or online. And thank you so much today for joining us. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Lisette, thank you so much for that amazing presentation, and for, more importantly, really for all that you have been doing and all of these different levels of grappling with nature and communities, natural communities, human communities. We're all one natural community that you've been doing. So you and I will talk for about 10 minutes, and then we invite people. There's some questions in the Q&A, but I invite people who are watching or participating to put questions in the Q&A. And also this talk has wonderfully, so beautifully, it has ranged from the very small one observation that a person makes to the really global, what the Wildlife Picture Index tells us. And so there's a lot to understand about what we're doing and why and how in between. So please feel free to ask the simplest of questions, as well as the most cosmic of questions, because I think both Lisette and I would like to respond to those, even if we don't answer you in a satisfactory way. And so I just have to say, with the Wildlife Picture Index, I've constantly been quite fascinated with this particular way of looking at nature and biodiversity. So this is the Wildlife Picture Index, which you guys at the Golden Gate National Recreation Area have been really leaders in participating in, is also really, it's at the intersection of technology and nature and people. And how does that have to do with individuals? Well, I'll just say, My son Nicholas, who is now 20, and he wouldn't do that with me now, but for a number of years, Nick would go with me and we would go to the Marin Municipal Water District offices, either out in Tam or in Corte Madera, and we would tag photographs. So you mentioned how many millions of photographs you guys have collected. So we would look at those photos. Now, do you still have that? Do you still have that capacity for people to help you do that?
So in 2019, we stopped cataloging in order to move to the new iteration of the Wildlife Insights platform. So and this is, I'm trying to do some poetic justice for some. I know some of our volunteers are on the platform, and I'm just trying to channel our like communal frustration with a platform that was in development. So the first iteration of Wildlife Insights that we used, we were an early adopter, had a lot of, was in development. And so in order to graduate to its next evolution, we needed to stop everything for a little while, transfer the data over, and then start anew. Knowing that protocols were gonna look different, that we wouldn't necessarily have to ask people to join us at a physical place anymore, that they might be able to hang out at home in their fuzzy slippers and do stuff. So that was going to need a whole new level of effort and planning that we wanted to do well. So we paused. And then 2020 happened, and the team that was developing Wildlife Insights, a lot of them were in Europe. They were very heavily affected by the lockdowns there. And so there's just been, delay on delay of the new platform. But I'm really happy to announce that, we are in what I'm calling our sandbox phase. So we have access to the new platform. We're playing around with it. We're troubleshooting, and we are working towards a timeline to return to having something that people can participate in that's going to look different. And we are going to be reaching out to some of our previous participants to get their feedback, because I don't think we can do community science if we're not having a two-way conversation.
That's great. It's a huge challenge. I mean, because you're doing the science, Lisette, and you're also, really thinking about who gets to do science, who gets to say what it is and what it's for. And you're really putting your arms and your mind and your heart around this community of people in the Bay Area and in Marin in particular. And sometimes the word science doesn't seem to quite fit in with that. And, you're doing so much. You went over a lot of amazing ground. One thing that really struck me is just the different scales of the kinds of work that you're doing. So the bees, Gretchen the Boon, am I right that does she still have her Great Sunflower Project?
I believe that she does.
So this is the biggest citizen science project around pollinators in the world. Gretchen the Boon has been a leader in citizen science from the get-go, coming from the impetus of a hardcore scientist who wants data and who is seeing that in order to understand what's going on with pollinators and what's going on with the ecology of the world, we need data on a scale that we don't have enough scientists to get. So she has been really at the forefront of figuring out how to engage people to help her and give her data. And she's been at it for a very long time. So she's an amazing person, and it's amazing that you guys are doing this at TAM. So here's a simple question that's not so simple. You have, I think you said you have 283 bee species at TAM. Okay, so that sounds like a lot. That sounds pretty healthy. Why should I worry about pollinators?
Well, so in other parts of California and the world, and by other parts of California, I mean our neighbors to the north, Sonoma, there's already been landscape level scale declines detected, and due to a variety of factors, some of them, including landscape level change, wildfire, the use of of pesticides, and so you can't know and attribute and what you don't measure. And these studies weren't looking at mechanisms for change, But if you don't know that something changed, then you can't begin to form hypotheses about the mechanisms. So overall, yeah, that is why long-term monitoring matters, right? For anything, it's the whole frog boiling analogy, right? You don't know that something's changing if you don't measure it a lot of the time.
So the frog boiling analogy, will you explain that, Lisette? I think I know what you're talking about, but maybe everybody hasn't heard that.
Yeah. So maybe the more way I think about it, it's like this idea of shifting baselines, right? So a great example of this is when people go fishing, right? And they tell fish stories, and the fish that our great grandparents used to see were much bigger, right? And then because of various seasons overfishing, destruction of marine habitat, the fish are getting smaller and smaller. But a big fish is only as big as the biggest fish you've ever seen. So it's all relative, right? So if your great grandfather doesn't measure that fish and you don't know it's like a 10-foot fish for sure, then maybe a 3-foot fish looks plenty big to you, when in reality, it's actually quite small.
Yes, and so we don't even know what we don't know. This is what is so brilliant, really, about the big data part of citizen science or community science, which is that you do get to see the picture of what's really happening. It's a very unique conjunction, and I'll just say this and then I'm going to open it up to our question and answer. Citizen science, community science is a huge conjunction between the personal observation and experience, which is hugely important because you are where you are right now. Nobody else is right there. If I'm looking out my window and I see a hummingbird, that instance is never going to come again. So I need to get that on iNaturalist because I'm really contributing to a picture of what's really happening. At the same time, the way that we understand big patterns is through the agglomeration of these images, as with the Wildlife Picture Index. And so what you have with One Tam and with what Lisette is doing is really bringing together the personal and the cosmic, and the biggest picture. So it's just however you enter into this conversation, just enter into it, just be part of it. And then you'll find your place over time that gives you the most pleasure and satisfaction. So let's go to the question and answer. If somebody wants to prompt us from Bay Nature or from the Brower Center with questions, you guys have been reading them as we've been talking. Please do. One question I know that I saw was about the graphics that you have. And I think that person was responding to the fabulous photo composites of Matt McLean, which are just gorgeous. I love them, but they're also a little bit hilarious because the one where you've got the mountain lion and then the smaller mammals, well, guess what? They would never be in a picture together because that mountain lion would terrify those other animals or be eating one of them. So, but what is amazing about the composite is it just does show you that all of these animals are living their lives in the same space and in relationship to each other.
Right, and I think it underscores this idea that you might go out and on a hike or just look at the mountain and not see something, but they're there.
They are there.
They're there.
And they don't want you to see them really.
Yeah.
All right, I'm looking at the Q&As here. Yeah. How can I become a citizen science? Somebody asked, a scientist. You go with that. How can they do it?
Well, you can a lot of ways, but one of the most immediate ways you can become a citizen scientist right now is to download the iNaturalist app on your phone. Go to the iNaturalist website and start looking through the tutorials and step outside and begin making observations of whatever moves you, right? Whatever wild thing moves your heart. And right there, you're a citizen scientist. Welcome.
That's really a great answer. I'm just going to bring up a couple of, because iNaturalist, we should have perhaps spent a minute on iNaturalist. This is an online platform that you join on your laptop or your desktop, but in general you use it through your phone, but you can also just take photographs with a camera and then upload it to iNaturalist. And iNaturalist is a great biodiversity observation system made up of our eyes, everybody's eyes around the globe. And it is housed at the California Academy of Sciences. I tell the creation story of iNaturalist in my book, Citizen Scientist, which converged so beautifully with the citizen science flowering at the Academy and also with the efforts in Marin. So all of this has happened together in a wonderful way. I was telling the gang who are behind the scenes today that I'm teaching a class at the California Academy of Arts right now. And I've got students all over the world, like half of them are in China. And we're Zooming classes, right? But I have them using iNaturalist, so they're sharing observations of plants and animals in China with us here in the Bay Area. And it is absolutely fascinating. You know, I'm learning so much. Here's a really good question, which is whether mammals or other big, how do we monitor them? And that's a Golden Gate Raptor observatory question. I was a participant in that for 6 years and I really enjoyed it and learned so much. So what we're watching every year that you can volunteer, you can do this. It's between August and November every year. There's a migration over the Golden Gate Gateway. But what we're seeing is basically juveniles mostly. There are some adults, but you're watching the migration, which is also a generational transfer, right? Now, there's a part of the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. I'm not sure the status of this now because I haven't been involved in a few years, where there would be a telemetry element. And so this, tracking device would be put on some of the birds. And so in that case, those particular birds would be tracked exactly where they were going over a certain period of time. But in general, it's really getting numbers every year of how many species, which species are we seeing? Are they juvenile, adult, male, female? And what part of that migration from August to November are we seeing? And just gigantic amounts of information about biodiversity have been gleaned from this incredible program, the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. And Lisette talked about Alan Fish, who's one of the gurus of citizen science, and he's a homegrown hero of ours, and you can meet him, which I suggest.
And then just kind of answering the question about individuals. So the Wildlife Picture Index project methodology we don't keep track of individuals, although like my prediction, if I could look into a crystal ball, is that maybe eventually we will have the computational technology to like match spots or, chin marks or something like that. But the project that Bill Merkel at National Park Service is heading up with the Coyotes, keeping track of individuals. That is, so that is a dedicated effort to track the life histories of individuals and understand dispersal from the Marin headlands.
Well, coyotes are pretty fascinating. They're very highly adapted to humans. And, they do really well where humans live. But we should be very grateful for them. They eat rats, my friends. So you want them eating those freaking rats so they're not like running across your doorstep. And they do a lot for the overall health of the ecosystem. So we do want our coyotes. And, coyotes are right at the edge, right, of what biodiversity we love and what biodiversity do we want to keep at bay? And these are really big social, emotional, and practical questions. With so much biodiversity, under so much pressure that we are in, a terrible extinction event, and really, it can't be overstated how bad it is. We really need to educate ourselves, become involved, and tune in to how this physical world is working and how these species are helping it work, from bees to coyotes. Lisette, I think we're going to wrap up in like 2 minutes, so I would love you to wrap it up for us. You're muted.
So I was just going to answer a couple more questions about the Wildlife Picture Index really quick. So I'm seeing a question about why we ended the analysis in 2017 and didn't go all the way through 2021. And I believe that that was already answered, but I just want to clarify, is that we simply had, this is a really ambitious and difficult project that has had technological constraints. And so hopefully we're now at a place where we can move forward and catch up. And then I'm just seeing a question about the San Mateo Coast and how folks can learn more about wildlife and their habitats there. Exploring on iNaturalist is a really great start. And in general, I am less savvy to that part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. So Mary Ellen, do you have any suggestions for
I sure do, actually. Thank you, Lisette, because it reminds me to tell people that there's something called Snapshot Cal Coast. You should write that down, Snapshot Cal Coast, and put it in your Google browser. So this is something that Rebecca Johnson and others from the California Academy of Sciences spearheads. And it is basically, it's either 10 days or 2 weeks of really concentrated effort to get iNaturalist observations along the coast. And it's actually really one of the most impactful citizen science collaborations that there is in the world, because it's been going on for a number of years, and it's a collaboration with professional monitoring systems. So coastlines in particular are monitored very carefully. You know, just think oil spills, just think sovereign boundaries of nations. You know, when Lisette and I didn't have a chance, we could do this another time, to talk about traditional ecological knowledge and what are sovereign boundaries anyway, and what is Western science. But whatever the background of all this is, here we are in this moment of time, and you can bet that the United States of America defends its sovereign boundaries, like with our military. And that happens at the coasts. So the monitoring of the coast is of the utmost impact and importance to national security. It is also really where we understand what's happening in the global climate change, in ocean acidification, and everything. You can really help get into this and really help figure this out for the right reasons by participating in Snapshot Cal Coast, which occurs in June. And I don't have the exact date in my mind, but you can find it very easily looking at the Cal Academy website or iNaturalist, or just Google Snapshot Cal Coast. And now I think we are done, but we could, of course, we're just getting started. I just want to reiterate that I love By Nature magazine and that I depend on it so much for knitting up all of these different kinds of layers of information and engagement about science and where we live. And to also really thank Lisette for doing such an amazing job of having this, you know, professional scientist's big head that she has, and this big heart of the community science organizer, and making the connection, which could not be more important. It is the connection we need to make between what we know and what we feel and what we care about. And so thank you all for participating.
Thank you all for participating. Really, community science is here. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you.